Hey, welcome back. Lesson number 3 is about how you give consequences to your children when they are misbehaving, when they're making a bad choice. Now, there's 2 basic type of consequence that you are going to give your children when they're misbehaving. One is what I call a created or a forced consequence, and the other one is a natural consequence. Now, a created consequence is a consequence that you make up that is not directly related to their behavior. So an example of that would be, hey, every time you guys argue, I'm going to take $1 out of your allowance. What does their allowance have to do with their arguing? It's not directly related. But created consequences are tempting to use because they tend to get results very quickly, at least in the beginning. They're also very risky. They tend to backfire on you. And the reason they backfire is, first of all, your children are likely to misunderstand why you're doing it in the first place because it's not directly related. It almost comes across like, well, you didn't like what I did, so now you're mad at me, so now you're going to take away what I want. You're just doing that because you're mean. You're just doing that because you're mad. And it becomes almost like a personal thing between you and your kids, and that doesn't really set the tone of what you want. The other reason is over time, the effect wears off. So what about when your kid says, you want to take $1 away? I don't care if you take $1. I don't care if you don't give me my whole allowance. I'm not going to do it. Then what are you going to do, right? It kind of backs you in a corner. Then you got to create something else. The third reason that it's risky, and this is really the biggest one, is it's very difficult to learn. It's one step removed, or actually it's one additional step that your child has to go through to learn their lesson. So basically you're asking them to do this thought process of, okay, so because I have a consequence in this area of my life, I need to change my behavior in another area of my life. It's not directly connected, and they just don't always get it. It's just a longer path to learning. So what we want to do is we want to steer away from created consequences and push more towards natural consequences. The most basic form of a natural consequence is making it right. It's being able to go back and to see what you did and then to turn that around. So examples that were, hey, you put the hole in the wall. That was your choice. You got angry. You put the hole in the wall. You need to use your money and your time to fix the wall. It was, you made the choice to be mean, so now you need to do something nice. You need to make that right. You need to fix that situation. Or you misused the privilege of the car. You didn't come back on time. You lost trust, so you're going to lose that privilege of the car until you can build back trust. See how that's more directly related? They don't have to think around in a circle to figure out, hey, what am I supposed to be learning here? The thing with natural consequences, they do take longer and they take a little bit more thought to put into place, but they are much more effective. And I think the coolest thing about natural consequences is they teach personal responsibility. They teach you how to own your own mistakes, your own choices. And that's something I hear from parents all the time. They're always saying, my kids aren't responsible. They never take responsibility for things. They're always blaming. They're always thinking it doesn't involve them or it doesn't apply to them. A natural consequence is an excellent way to teach personal responsibility. So Samantha is someone who really made a shift from using created consequences to using natural consequences. She told me this one time where she walked in, she was actually in the other room, and she heard this huge commotion and then a bang and a crash and all kinds of noise. She ran into the room and her 2 boys were wrestling and fighting. One of them, the older one, had the younger one in a headlock, and the younger one was biting the older one's arm. They had knocked over a dresser. Stuff was everywhere. And so she screams, she yells for him to stop, and then she goes to her go-to created consequence that she basically just used for everything. She said, "You're losing everything." So she would take away all their electronics, and the thing that really got them, and she knew this got to them, was they lived in a small place. So her boys always wanted to get outside. They always wanted to get outside the home. And she wouldn't let them do that. She said, you've got to stay here and you can't play with anything, you can't have anything, and that was her only consequence. The problem with that is it really tied her hands. Because like, what happens if they argue in another 5 minutes? Well, they've already lost everything, right? And it wasn't directly teaching, you know? And see, the thing is with these creative consequences, a lot of times kids will avoid the consequence. They're not really learning. You know, they're not really trying something different. They just want to avoid the consequence. And where's the learning in that? Okay, so when she shifted to using natural consequences, she handled that very differently. What she would do is when they were arguing, she'd walk in, and if she needed to, she'd separate them. You know, you go to your room, you go over here, and she'd say, life is on hold. That was the way that she would describe it. Your life is on hold until you make this right. And what you have to do to make it right is you guys have to apologize to each other. And it's not about who started it or who's right. You guys need to apologize for fighting with each other, because we don't do that anymore in this family. So you need to apologize, and you need to sit down and have a conversation with me about how to handle this situation better. And then she left it up to them. You know, if they wanted to sit in their room all day because they didn't want to apologize and because they didn't want to do that problem solving, then that was their choice. But they weren't going to get to do anything else until they did that. If in 5 minutes they made a sincere apology and then they talked through what happened, how they could handle it better, and come up with a plan like that, then it was good. It was done, and it moved forward. And that made a big difference because her kids were taking responsibility for what they did, and they were learning. They were engaging in that problem solving, and it made a huge difference with her boys. It took a little bit of time, but it doesn't take that long. And if you think about it, that whole process, yes, that's a lot more work for parents. It is a lot more work to do that than just to, you know, throw out some random consequence. But in the long run, it works so much quicker. It saves you so much more time when your kids learn how to stop doing the behavior that's causing trouble. And the other thing about it is her boys were feeling that she really cared about them. You know, this wasn't just, hey, let me throw stuff at you. This is, let me take time to explain to you what's going on and to work this through. You still have to be firm with this. You still have to be consistent, but it's a very loving way. It shows a lot of care and concern, and it absolutely pays off in the long run. Now, Maria, she had younger kids. One of the things that was going on with Maria is her kids were having a tough time going to bed. They were always delaying it. It was taking them forever. They were going way past their bedtime. So when she shifted to a natural consequence, what she did is their bedtime, I believe, was like at 7:30. No, they were supposed to get ready for bed at 7:30. So at 7:30, if they weren't starting to get ready for bed, and then if they didn't get in bed by 8 o'clock, which was their actual bedtime, then the next night, they were going to have to start getting ready for bed at 7. They were going to have to stop playing, stop doing everything, and start getting ready at 7 just for that one night. And if they did well with that, then they could go back to the regular schedule the following night. And that's a natural consequence because they're clearly not getting ready in time, so the whole thing moves earlier. You see how that works? Now, I know you have a lot of questions about this. There's a lot of things that I haven't covered yet, but this is one of those foundational points that I promise we're going to answer a lot of these other questions later, but it's this foundational point where I want you to understand the importance and the power of natural consequences. And we want to shift from doing those created consequences, to natural consequences. All right? Now, the next lesson number 4, I really enjoy talking about because it's the mistakes, it's the things that I know you are doing because I do them too. All parents do these things, but we need to be aware of them because they cause us a lot of trouble in the long run. If we can identify it and reduce the amount of times we do these things, oh man, things go so much better. So I'm really excited for you to watch lesson number 4, but take a moment before you do. Think about how much are you using created consequences with your kids, and how can you start already right now shifting things to natural consequences. All right, I will see you in lesson 4.